CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center present The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 39, How We Love, Part 1. And now, your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson, and special guest, Cassandra Aikens.
Welcome to the show, friends. Happy Monday. I'm Cynthia Alice. I am the host of The Authentic Spiritual Journey, and we're here in one of my favorite places.
This is one of your favorite places?
Totally.
There's like Disney World and then 818 Studios?
No,
or is
not
it probably,
Disney World.
It's probably home.
Yeah, probably home.
Your backyard.
Yeah, right. We are in 818 Studios with my very skilled producer.
Hey, I am Dave Croft. What is happening, everybody? Happy Monday and happy end of March here.
Yes, happy end of March. Right. It's hard to believe March is wrapping up, but we're glad that you are choosing to share your time with us. Today's a special day for us on the show because I have a special guest, somebody I love dearly as is my life partner, and I've also learned a great deal from. Her name is Cassandra Aikens, and she is also one of the sponsors of our show. So welcome, honey.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Hello,
Yeah,
everyone.
we're so glad to have you. If you've heard us talk about Cassandra Aikens and Aikens Counseling, this is the Aikens of Cassandra Aikens Counseling.
Yes, this is the star of Aikens Counseling Center.
Yeah, I love having guests on board. Nothing. I'm not taking anything away from our time, RCA, but I know I just like having guests here.
Me too.
It changes just the whole dynamic, and so thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
The last show we did together was a hugely listened to show on past lives, and I loved doing it as well.
We could have talked about it for days.
Totally.
And I thought of you. I've been working on a piece of music that is referencing a dog's purpose.
Oh yes,
And do you know that's basically how dogs live multiple lives, and they go back. He's going back to his owner and all of this. So I thought of you and the whole kind of past lives thing.
I've never regressed a dog, so I guess there's always a first time.
No, it's not like a regression. It's like the dog lives multiple lives as a dog and searches out his owner through every time he reincarnates.
Oh, every time he reincarnates,
he searches for his owner.
Now I believe that.
Yeah.
That is sweet.
That is totally sweet. We have to catch that.
Yeah, it's
movie.
called A Dog's Purpose.
Oh
I've
yes,
heard of it.
I heard of it too. Well, I had this dog one time named Buddy, and I would take him to work with me, often. And I worked, of course, at a spiritual center like I do now. And everybody in the church just loved Buddy. And there was this particular woman, and she's made her passing now. Her name was Fern, and she was in her 80s when I met her. And she loved dogs. And I said, well, Fern, everybody says Buddy is going to come back as a person next time. And she said, well, I think that's too bad because I like him as a dog.
Aw.
Cute.
So yes, we love our animals at our house. So anyway, I'm glad to have Cassandra with me. She has an amazing practice in Winter Park and a lot of workshops that you do too. So just tell us a little bit about what you do there, just to bring our listeners up to date with who you are and what you do and why you would sponsor such a show anyway.
Oh, right. Well, I think that our goal as a human being is to learn to be more authentic so that we can have an authentic life. And that's the name of your show, The
Right.
Authentic Journey.
Spiritual Journey.
So I have found that being able to be experiential in approach to that is really the most effective for me in helping other people to just really find themselves and to continue healing in a way that just sheds all that stuff that we don't really have a lot of space to carry.
Yes. Well, we talk often among ourselves at home about, talk therapy and how talk therapy is wonderful and has its place, but you can't get to everything just with talk therapy. And I will tell you, friends, as a minister, I've heard from many, many people that, I talked about the same problem for 10 years and I never went anywhere. And I know you do, or your approach rather, is a broader approach rather than just talk therapy. So I wanted you to at least mention some of the things that you do in your practice, related to that, because you really do work with the soul, not just the mind.
That's right. So I have my approaches Jungian approach, Jungian-centered psychotherapy, and also transpersonal psychotherapy. And both of those are spiritual in their modalities and the way that we can look at things that are not necessarily talk related. For instance, dreams, work with music, meditation, working with images, those kinds of things. So when we do those kinds of approaches, we turn the therapy from outer related,
Right.
looking to the outside of
Right.
ourselves
Right.
for answers, to what is known as your inner journey. So it is helping people to develop a practice and continue a practice of inner journeying and inner healing, because we really need to know ourselves. And all kinds of things stand in the way of our authenticity when we don't look at what those are and approach them from a spiritual perspective.
I think the next time you're on, we should do something with dreams, because, man, everybody's interested in dreams. That show is going to be a really listened to show as well. I'm going to put you on the spot with that next time.
Okay.
We're going to do dreams and even the past life work. I mean, all of that does get to the soul. And today, I really wanted to talk about not something specific necessarily in Cassandra's work, but totally specific. In other words, it's not a modality per se. She does breath work, she does past life, she does dream work. But the topic for today, I can't remember if I gave you the title or not, is how we love. How we love. And when we were even talking about this, it's like, oh, well, what's that about? I said, well, here's what I think it's about, is that right now in the world, what I see is a lot of just weird, funky energy. And what I know is most important is love, the power of love, how we love each other. I mean, really, love is the unifying force of the universe. We all need it, we all want it, and yet most of us don't know how to do it well.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, so I think that's going to be an important topic for us today, because how we love touches every single relationship we have, from the person at the grocery store to our spouses and our kids, our aunts and uncles, the way we treat our coworkers and bosses. And we want to love from a deeper, a connected place. And often the very thing that we need to do to connect with another, to feel even the love of God, for instance, or the love for ourselves, we go and we do the opposite. Right? So I want us to just rap about that today, about just how we love. How do we get to where we are, kind of, in terms of how we love?
It's such a deep question, right? And in part, I think we love how we were taught to love, how we experienced love. What was our source of love? What was that about? And, you and I were talking earlier about source of love, which is a really important concept of, when we're small children, we don't know anything, right? We know nothing. And so we are little tiny babies. We have these big parents. And so we pretty quickly learn how they love us. And sometimes it isn't very well, unfortunately. But the source of love then becomes, I believe it becomes sort of an unconscious pattern of how we then love others, or the qualities that we associate with love.
Yes. A source of love is a really big topic, because we could do actually several shows just on source of love. But that idea is, however we were loved, and even I believe it starts in the womb even. I went to a whole weekend-long workshop just about the impact, what happens in the womb. And I know from all your Stan Groff and the perinatal birth matrix and all that stuff, you can... Please feel free to bring that in, because that's not my area. But I was so impacted by this a weekend long. It was like I think it was called like the Baby Summit, and it was before my son was born, and all the things that a little one goes through in the womb, what they experience, and then once they're born into the world, then those, even though their DNA has already been encoded, all of those attitudes, all those behaviors, the way a little one is treated, they start to put together that if I'm treated this way, then this is what love is, right? Not this is a type of love, but this is love. And so, in other words, how we understand love is how we were first love by the ones closest to us, and often our mothers, and certainly the way we were parented, whether we were parented by our mothers or other adults around us. But then that is how, right, we walk through the world.
Yeah. And we attract situations to ourselves and people that we get to practice that love. And I want to say something about love right here because it's important. It's a continuum, right? So there's love on one end of that continuum, which is pure love, the energy of love, and I'll say this to the audience, and, love is not supposed to hurt.
Yes. Yes.
If it hurts,
yeah.
it ain't love.
Right.
So on the opposite end of that, we call it all love, but that's not exactly what I mean. I just don't know how to say, talk about love without just saying the word love.
Like Shakti love.
Yeah. And the opposite of that, of course, we still call, they loved me the best they could, things like that, but it's not really love. Love is not supposed to hurt.
Arcia, you said Shakti love? I'm not familiar with that. I thought.
Well, it's just like really pure love.
Okay.
Pure love. That's from Hinduism.
Okay.
Yeah, it's from Hinduism. It's just a pure, unadulterated, like searing love in the best possible way. Like when we see ourselves, when we see a place in ourselves that need healing and we've never seen before, and then we just cry. It's like love. It's a love that breaks apart calcified beliefs and energies. Yeah, it's a really powerful spiritual love.
Would you call that the archetype of love?
I guess I would.
Okay. So then what we have to look at then, I think it's important to mention that, when you think of an archetype or a pattern of something like love, you say, well, what are the qualities of that? Right. And so then we assign qualities to that, which would be compassion, nurturing,
even forgiveness.
So certain qualities go with that. And we look at that image of love and then we say, how aligned am I to that image? So if I grew up in a family where I didn't really know what pure love was, or what I never received it, I have no idea that it even exists, then I might think love is somebody that slaps you and then buys you a gift.
That's right.
So then I'm looking at the image of love and I'm not very well aligned with it, right? I'm not congruent. I'm incongruent with the qualities of love. And I think healing has a lot to do with looking at where we are off track with what love is.
Right. And I think that's a process for each person because, again, if we grow up, say, being hit and then bought a gift, well, we learn that's what love is. So then that's what we become attracted to. It's like we have this invisible inner radar that like points out the person who's an exact match for that particular inner pattern that's been created, even though it's unhealthy. We think that's what love is.
And that's the source of love.
And that is our source of love. Yes.
So love equals hurt.
Right. So
love hurts.
Right. And that's a phrase we've actually heard before in our pop culture. Yeah.
Isn't that a song?
Yeah.
Love hurts or something like that.
I think that's actually Love Heals.
Oh, Love Heals? Whatever.
No, it's Love Hurts.
Is it
It's
Love
Love
Hurts?
Hurts, yeah.
Okay.
I think that's more of like a breakup song, but
Yeah. Well, that really does. That's gotta hurt.
Yeah.
Boy, that's when you really feel love hurting, right?
Yeah, and I want you to say a little bit more about when you said the archetype of love. For people who are brand new to the idea of archetypes, what does that mean, archetype?
Well, simply put, because it's, a really depth psychological concept, so I don't want to get into the depth of it, but just simply put, an archetype is like what's that word? A prototype of something.
Right.
It's a pattern of something. So anything can be an archetype. So for instance, an archetype of mother. So if you assign qualities to this archetype, then mothers are loving, nurturing. They know how to have relationship. They're relational, intuitive, those kinds of things. But if the mothering you got was not loving or nurturing
Yes.
or any of that stuff, then the archetype, you're not in alignment with the reality of what the archetype is.
Yes.
Does that make sense? So I just say it's a pattern of something.
Right. And I know, I remember when we first met each other, we were reading several of the same books. And one of them even was about archetypes. One was about shadow. And one I think was about sociopaths, but we'll save that for another day. I think that was called The Sociopath Next Door.
What book club did that come from?
Yeah, we were like, you read that? Who reads for fun The Sociopath Next Door? Well, we do.
We do.
We should put that in the show notes too. That is actually a great book, The Sociopath Next Door.
Sociopath Next Door.
Talk about an archetype.
Yeah.
My gosh, to understand.
You're right. That book does really teach you about the qualities of a sociopath.
It does. I was in a period of my life where I was reading a lot of books. I was really learning a lot about archetypes. And I can't believe I can't remember the woman's name. It's called it's a really famous book.
The Tao of Equus?
No, about archetypes.
Oh,
Carol somebody.
Carolyn Mace?
No.
She does a thing on archetypes.
She does. Never mind. We'll save it and put it in the show notes. We won't spend the next
Is it
15
a
minutes.
Jungian?
Yeah, it's a book about archetypes. Maybe it's called The Hero Within or something like that.
Okay.
But I'll look it up and get it to you. But bottom line, it helped me understand patterns of behavior and what was like appropriate behavior. Like so if I have this internal guidance system that's faulty and keeps rerouting me, then I need to figure out a new archetype to align myself with. In other words, if my source of love or my archetype of love that I grew up with is faulty, then I need to align with the true archetype of love.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And that can only come through a healing process.
Yes. So
or divine grace, maybe.
yes.
Yeah, I just thought about that. Maybe if you've got an experience of a divine intervention of some sort, you can experience love.
Yes. I think what I keep coming back to in my mind about all of this is that all of us as human beings need love, we want love, and we want to give love.
Mhm.
But something gets in the way.
Mm.
And ways, and it's almost always, always in every case I know of, worse with the people we're closest to.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's because that's where that pattern that we've been drawn to is so strong. Like I've heard it said, she married her dad or she married her mom, meaning that whatever source of love we grow up with, that's what we end up marrying. And I believe the reason we do that is so that we heal. I believe the soul keeps trying to heal. Yes, we're drawn together like a magnet, but I think ultimately the soul is trying to work something out.
Mm-hmm. I believe that too. The karma,
Exactly.
is really trying to become more authentic.
Yes.
And we have this guiding part of us that will put the people, the places, and the things right in front of us and give us lots of time and opportunity to practice.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit more too about how, when we do find ourselves, again, it doesn't have to be romantic relationship because it's really in any relationship, how we relate to friends or neighbors, the grocery store, but the ones that are closest, it seems like the patterns emerge more because the connection is deeper. And, so I want you to help us in the next half of the show to do a little bit more about how do we get through some of this stuff and what are those blocks, because we want love, we need love, and I think we just need a little more skill on how we love better.
Okay.
And I think you can help us all with that, and maybe we'll help each other since we're partners in life.
Okay.
That's what I really, really hope, is that we're going to help all of us. And it's a pleasure for me, friends, by the way, to have my partner here because we're always working on ourselves. We're always discussing how we can be better for each other and better at what we do. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us. So we're glad you're joining us. We'll be back after these messages.
We'll return to the program in just a few moments, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partner, CCU Orlando, who has helped make this episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey possible. CCU Orlando is a welcoming community dedicated to transforming lives, celebrating diversity, and supporting soul growth. Christ Church Unity is located at 771 Holden Avenue in Orlando, Florida, with Sunday services at 9 and 11 a.m. You can stream services live online as well as learn more at christchurchunity.net. We'd also like to extend our thanks to our podcast partner, Aikens Counseling Center. Cassandra Aikens is a licensed mental health counselor dedicated to creating sacred space where clients can explore their own inner process in a safe, non-judgmental, and supportive environment. She works with individuals, couples, and groups who are seeking to live a more authentic life. Aikens Counseling Center is located in Winter Park, Florida, and can be found on the web at CassandraAikens.com. And now we return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey.
Welcome back, friends. We're glad you're joining us today. We're talking about a topic. It's one of my most favorite topics, really, because I love love. I was born on the day of love on February 14th. And so my whole life, it seems like I've been very interested in the topic of love because I think, too, when you grow up in a big family, you see how people relate, how relationships are forged, how they end. And I had the privilege of being the youngest, which meant I learned a lot from watching my older siblings and how they related, and from my parents as well. And what we were talking about right before the break is just, how do we get past some of these things that keep us from loving really how we want to, you know what I mean? From living from our highest self as we love. Because I know you see that you have to see this in your practice.
Yes, and in my own life too.
Oh, yes. Well, I wasn't going to say, but
you were going to say I was perfect. Yeah. Okay. So from my perspective, and what I really believe is that where we get in trouble in relationships is when our unhealed pieces come in contact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So
hate it.
And those are another word for that is when our complexes run into one another. Yeah.
Yes, complexes.
So complexes. It's all about complexes, folks. Everything.
And a complex, for those of us unfamiliar with psychological terms.
Okay. Well, so Jung said a complex is when a complex arises when we experience a defeat in life.
Well, that's pretty much everybody.
Everyone has complexes.
Even you, Dave.
Oh,
Lots of them, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Amen.
So if I'm a little child and I have an experience that I feel defeated in,
Yes.
I'm not going to feel very loved, right?
Right.
So I'm going to develop out of that wounding a belief about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to experience a feeling around it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have a sensation in my body around it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to go most likely in my unconscious awareness. I'm not even going to know that exists.
Which so when you say that, so I'm going along in life. I've had these experiences, so I don't even know I have this complex, right?
Right.
So if I have a reaction to something, I don't go, "Oh, gee, that's me having a complex." I say, "What's wrong with them?"
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember one time when I was a kid, I didn't clean up my room or something, and my mother got very, very angry.
Yeah.
And she wasn't like a yell. Well, I don't want to say that, but she never really yelled at me much. It was usually my older sisters. But anyway, that's a whole other show. And so there's one time that like I just didn't clean up my room or something, and it was she just kind of snapped. And so she came in and she was like making up the bed, but she was like doing it really kind of aggressively and like kind of throwing things around. And so to this day now, and I didn't know it until me and Shannon, started seeing each other, and she had got angry and elevated voices and kind of started like throwing some stuff around. And that's when it all kind of came flooding back to me.
Oh, yeah.
That I have a very visceral reaction to yelling and people in anger throwing things, and I'm very much convinced that it's from that incident.
Yeah, because that was clearly a defeat. right? You can just imagine. How old were you?
Oh, I must have been 10.
Okay, so here's this little 10-year-old boy living life, not thinking much about the room being messed up, just playing probably. And then all of a sudden, there's this eruption of energy that affects you on all those levels I talked about. And so what happens then is I call that triggering. So you got triggered,
Right.
and then the complex arose. And there's a belief around that somewhere. We don't have to get into it right now, but I'm just going to make it up and say maybe your belief is that women will hurt you or something, or I'm not lovable. Okay. So now you're in a relationship with someone else, and something looks like, feels like, smells like that incident that happened when you were 10. And all of a sudden, your body has that same reaction, and unconsciously, you go to the same belief. And the belief, let's say it's I'm not lovable. Okay. And so now that's going to, unless we work those complexes, you're going to have some sort of behavior that goes along with that. That's
Yeah.
we all do. Everybody
Right.
on the planet does this.
Yeah, my behavior that goes along with that is shutting down.
I was
Okay,
just say
so-
shut down
All
or
right,
freeze.
So shut down. Okay, so when you shut down, well, ain't nobody getting in there, right? Love is not welcome here.
Right.
All right. So that may probably does then trigger the other person
Right.
in their wound when they were developed a complex around something, which may be all men leave me, let's just say. Okay. So now we've got two spinning, energetic complexes in
man.
time and space. We're not even acting like human beings now because we're being possessed
Yes.
by the complex, and that's who's trying to have the relationship.
Right. 2 10-year-olds.
Two
Right,
10-year-olds.
right. And for all I know, Shannon had an experience growing up where her parents that's how they demonstrated conflict resolution or something. I don't
Exactly.
know.
Exactly.
And so you see, it's a perfect puzzle match.
Right.
That's what's so brilliant about it. To me, it's never ceased to amaze me how brilliant our relational complexes fit each other perfectly.
Why are you looking at me? Right. Exactly.
So when we can do the healing around that, which really includes the hardest part, changing the belief.
Yes.
Of course you're lovable, right? Of course everybody's lovable. It might be hard to love them, but there is an opportunity to have love in any relationship. So changing the belief within ourselves, because it's about ourselves that we believe it.
Yes. Well, it's interesting and all part of the soul journey too, because, another kid that could have happened to, their mom was doing this. Another kid says, bite me. I'm not, so it's like, it's a divine setup in the sense of how your soul responds. And that's been a real learning for me that, I'm the youngest of so many kids and, the things that impacted me or I seem to have to kind of struggle through, most of my siblings seem absolutely fine, so my response to it is completely different from theirs. And that's part of where the soul comes in too.
It is.
Yeah. So, and as I was thinking about this, and I just have to riff on this, Dave, that, you a 10-year-old kid didn't clean your room. What a normal behavior.
Right.
It just doesn't deserve. It's like, I want to go, Dave, it's okay. I want to go scoop up 10-year-old and go, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And who knows, if like my mom, her growing up,
yes.
what kind of things influenced that in her. And so.
Well, go ahead.
And there's a term for that called transgenerational complexes. It's when we don't look at them,
Right.
then we pass them through our lineage, and
Right.
they can be many lineages old.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I know I have made a conscious choice not to become an eruptive person when I'm angry. Like not that I've never not wanted to throw things or whatever, but I don't raise my voice. I don't do yelling and shouting. And anytime it happens in the house, I'm like, not okay. This is not how we resolve conflict.
This is not workable.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think it is. There's so many aspects to the healing of of complexes, and it's a lifelong work. I mean, so often in spirituality, and I don't know if this happens to you in psychology too, but people say, "Well, I just need to heal this, and I just want one appointment with you." And it's like sometimes people get the idea
Like it's
that
a drive-through or something.
When will I be finished?
when will I be done? I want to go, oh, bless you. I remember when I thought that. And being in reality is sometimes difficult because we really see things for what they are. We start to really experience, our own places that need healing. And the other piece I want to bring up about all this, I'm jumping around a little bit. The coffee's finally hitting in, kicking in. Is that also what happens? We didn't say this word, but you described it, projection. That we're projecting onto others what's actually what their intention is, what's even happening, instead of owning our own piece of that.
That's right.
So if and I don't want to use Dave's example, but if it's me, and something's triggered me or somebody's yelling at me, well then I can choose to deal with that. Like Dave said, I can say, this is not working, or I can start then calling them bad, and I can shut down and all of that. So that's the piece I'm responsible for.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Because projection is really a holy mechanism,
Yes.
but it's not a healthy thing
I think you should unpack that.
because one of the ways that the soul gets to know itself, it wants to know itself. The soul wants to know itself.
Yes.
We tend towards wholeness. Everyone tends towards wholeness.
Yeah.
So when the soul wants to know something about itself, it throws it out. So our projections have a holy function.
Yes.
But if we're not aware that all of that we're throwing out belongs to us, when I project onto you, it really belongs to me. It's not yours. But there's a wise part of me that wants me to know that about myself. So if I can heal that part of myself, then I'm becoming more authentic.
Yes. And then you're pulling the projection back. That's how we talk about it.
We pull it back.
We pull back the projection.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the other person's job is not to have any Velcro so that the projection sticks when it hits.
Yeah, we call those arrows.
Arrows.
You get an arrow stuck in you.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, sometimes, if one of us is in a lighthearted place and I'll say something, Cassandra will say, "Projection, Your Honor."
Projection. Oops.
But that doesn't work in every situation. Just for you
Right.
people in relationships
You might
out there.
not always be in a place to hear like
Sometimes I'm not in
Sometimes
the
it
mood.
makes you mad as fire, not
like-
you, but one. It makes one mad as
Oh
fire.
no! Sometimes it does
Sometimes
make me
it
mad
does,
as fire.
yeah.
I love
know
you,
that
sweetie, but
sense
now
the room.
now is
Yeah.
now is not the time.
Know your
I'm not
audience.
interested. I'm not interested in.
So something's trying to come through about bridging what we're talking about now and going back to the complexes
Yeah.
of beliefs.
Yes.
So it has been my experience, and I'm going to be brave enough to say it on air, that at the bottom of almost every complex, if you unpack it and then unpack it some more and then keep going deeper and you get to the thing, the belief is always going to be around low self-esteem.
Yes.
Amazing.
It's true.
I am not lovable.
I'm not enough.
I'm not enough. I'm unworthy. Nobody
that's
wants
the little
me.
that's the little piece of sand around the pearl that is you.
That is right. That's a beautiful image for that. And so if we had teachers, parents, people in our lives that said, you know what, you have that, you can reach full authenticity within yourself because you've got that already modeled. It's in your DNA. We can all be better. We really can. But something happened where, and this is your area, where we learned that other people hold what we believe about ourselves. And then we have low self-esteem around that. And then we're trying our whole life to be loved in a way that's not conscious because we don't even know it exists
Right.
I mean, it's just, it's a ball of twine. It's just unwrapping each one of those things and saying, it could be so simple as to say, you are God. You've got that God seed in you. And so you defer to that part of yourself, and the rest will take care of itself. If everybody did that, the rest would take care of itself.
Well, that is basically the soul work, ultimately.
That's it, yeah.
I mean, it's ultimately the soul work. And I have been quoted as saying, eventually all the psychological work is spiritual. And people have taken that to mean, oh, I just do a few affirmations and do spiritual bypass. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that all the work is around this deep, deep kind of spiritual angst of getting to I am holy, I am enough, and there's a lot we have to do often to get there. There's often therapeutic work. There's often workshops to attend. There's soul collage to do to see how these how these complexes got there, and then we do a soul collage in one of your workshops, and then we get this huge aha, and then we can see more of ourselves. So it's like it's a multifaceted, like multidimensional issue, this idea of how we love. It's a gigantic topic for a podcast.
It is.
What was I thinking?
I don't know.
Yeah, and we haven't even, one of the things that I'm interested in is love languages, and we haven't even gone
yes,
there as
we
far
can
as
talk about
talking
that.
about love languages.
Oh, yes, that's one of my favorite topics. The other thing I wanted to mention before we get any further, that's an area I've studied quite a bit. I'm not a licensed facilitator in it. I've just studied it for many years, is the Enneagram. The Enneagram. And there's a great book, we'll put it in the show notes, called The Enneagram Made Easy. And really, the Enneagram is, talk about a holy tool. The Enneagram goes through, and there's 9 personality types. And so all that we're talking about, how we love, even our source of love, it's not in the book in that language, but it basically says when we are not loved, from the highest level of love, we take on one of these 9 types. And then we live out this kind of archetype of unhealedness, in this particular way. And there are 9 basic types. And when I began to study this, and I realized that I was simply acting in accordance with some personality type that wasn't really from my essence, that totally woke me up. I was like, my goodness, there's other people like me, and oh my gosh, this is how I've tried to get my needs met. And, it was a big awakening tool. And I should do a class on this later in the year, maybe even in the summer, because it's an awesome class for self-reflection. I mean, you see yourself over and over and over. And all of us have parts of the 9 types, but we tend to have one strong type, and then there's some of the terms are kind of confusing. There's, you go towards one type in stress, one type when you're feeling good and healthy and loved, and there's even what are called wings. I won't get into all that, but anyway.
Do you have one of the authors that you would recommend?
I will do it. Put it in the show notes.
Okay.
I don't see the title over there on your screen right now, but I will find it.
Okay.
It's called, that's it, The Enneagram Made Easy, the one that looks like a cartoon on the front. I like simple, Dave. That's
This
it.
one? Okay,
Yeah.
I got you.
The Enneagram Made Easy, because there's cartoons, comics, I guess. And it'll have, for instance, it'll show all the 9 types at a dinner party. What are the typical thoughts of your type? What are the typical thoughts of another type? And then you go, oh, I know somebody. And you have to be careful because you don't want to really type other people, but it helps you understand where the behavior is coming from. And then you can come from this higher place of love, because you can have compassion and understanding, because you're seeing yourself and going, oh man, thank God people love me, even though, gee, sometimes I'm just like this number 7 in the book, which is my type. And they give you example of unrealized types, and then what a more realized version of this would be. And so it just helps you move out of the old, the old patterns.
Cool. I never really studied the Enneagram like you did.
Well, you've studied deeper stuff, I think.
Yeah,
But
I'm sure the books that you studied didn't have drawings and
they didn't have
cartoons.
They didn't have comics. Like
yeah, but
cartoons.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm with you, RCA.
Keep it simple, man.
Right.
You know what I mean? Well, and I've used it with staff, with boards. I've done a lot of trainings with different groups on this, and it's a great tool for people you work with too, because like one of the types is a 9, which is a peacemaker. That's, I mean, I'm not pointing at you, but it could be. And, and, you're wondering, why can this person never make a decision? And why are they always going, well, that's okay with me, even though you're thinking maybe it really isn't. Once you know they're a 9, it all makes sense. And so you learn ways to kind of help engage the 9 in a greater way. And when they're trying to move out of their, old way, it kind of helps everyone.
Well, it's a tool to help you understand somebody else and yourself and somebody else.
For sure.
So that then maybe you don't take things so personally. If they can't make a decision, you just don't get frustrated. You say, oh, they're a 9 and that's just part of their makeup.
Yeah, or like they're a 6, like this friend of mine I worked with, I was so surprised when I found out he was a 6 in his type. And like before a meeting, he was telling me, I really hate when somebody brings something up in a meeting I'm not aware of. I want a printed agenda slid under my door before I ever talk to a person. Well, that was really good information because it was my boss. And I'm on the fly. I love to just like have lively discussion. Well, that was seen as a threat and very like triggering to this person. And I, it's like they felt unsafe when they didn't know what was going to be coming their way. So that was like, a great tool.
And I think just like, any sort of personality test or understanding, it's or like Myers-Briggs or whatever. I think it's important not to say that this is the way I am and this is you will deal with it. I am like with Myers-Briggs. I know me and Shannon are really into that, and like ENFP versus an ISTJ. And I think it's important to say, to use these as a reference, as a way to kind of understand people, but not necessarily, I'm not saying you're doing this. I just know I have a habit of doing this and just kind of boxing them in and, hey, you are this and everything that goes wrong is because of this.
No, and I think the idea, as we started out with, and I think we're going to probably talk a little longer today for another show, is that the idea is to come from the highest level of love possible. And when we have a little understanding and we can bring wisdom then into our relationships, information can be very, very helpful. And it helps us not be so triggered. It helps us pull back our projections, as you were as you were speaking of, and then living from this higher level of love. And that's really the goal.
Yeah. And just to sum up what Dave said, I loved it because when we work on ourselves, we know ourselves.
Yes.
And I had a wise teacher one time that told me, she said, if you don't know yourself, anyone can name you. Think about that. If you don't know yourself, anyone can name you.
That's a good word. That's a good word to end on.
Okay.
That's a good word to end on.
That's a mic drop moment right there.
That's it. That's it. And friends, we encourage you to do the work of your soul, to spend time daily meditating, praying, being in silence, continuing to seek out ways to grow, to mature in consciousness. We want to be conscious beings. We want to be living from the highest level of the purest love. And we know that as you do this soul work, that you make the world a better place simply by being in it. So we bless you for and thank you so much for listening. And our prayer is always to be a blessing and to be blessed. So we thank you for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, and as always, we will have links to any of the books or resources that we talked about. We'll have links to those in our show notes. Be sure to go to the episode 039 at experienceofthesoul.com. Also, thanks for checking us out on YouTube as well as the podcast platform of your choice. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey, presented by CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible through the continued support of our angel patrons Dove Borland, Angela Martinez, Peter Gibson, and Paul Caswell, along with our partner patrons CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center. If you would like to help be a part of bringing shows like this and other programs to the channel, please consider becoming a patron. For more information, episode show notes, and details about our other programs on the channel, head over to experienceofthesoul.com. And if you enjoyed this program, you can help spread the word by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, or the podcast platform of your choice. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2019 Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.